it's a very uneven system that seemingly is playing out where high-level football players, high-level basketball players seemingly are getting a lot of the attention and the resources from that. And some of the other athletes in other sports are not getting it.
Welcome to The Ripple Effect, the podcast that takes you on a journey through the minds of Wharton faculty. I'm your host, Dan Loney, and in each episode, we'll be diving deep into the inspiration behind the groundbreaking research that Wharton professors have conducted and exploring how their findings resonate with the world today.
Well, as students gear up for the new school year and fall sports start to get back into session, we're going to spend some time today exploring the dynamic world of athletic endorsements. Pleasure to be joined here in studio by Ken Shropshire, Professor Emeritus of Legal Studies and Business Ethics here at the Wharton School. He is also Senior Advisor to Dean Erica James. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great, Dan. How are you?
Well, okay, so I'm doing well, but this topic of endorsements and NIL obviously has taken the world of athletics, college athletics, by storm the last couple of years. We're about, I think, almost 3 years from when we first started to hear NIL really hit our language. What kind of impact do you think it's had in that 3 years, and to the positive or to the benefit of the overall collegiate athletic experience?
It has had a huge disruptive impact, which I don't know if we gauge as positive or negative yet. It's an appropriate change. It's an appropriate disruptive change to have dollars that are coming into the system to the labor that's produced it. And to also, in some sense, you're not giving these student athletes something new. It's something they really had the right to, that the NCAA had taken away, this right to make money off of your name, image, and likeness, right. which is sort of the beginning of what this thing was. It's evolved into something a little bit different than just what we would think about. You referenced endorsements. It's turned out to be something a little different than what we contemplated it was going to be when these conversations first came into effect.
I'll get into what's going on at the college level, but I think there's also the component I wanted to talk to you about the expectation of what student athletes coming from high school going into college really should start to think about, because it's a very uneven system that seemingly is playing out where high-level football players, high-level basketball players seemingly are getting a lot of the attention and the resources from that. And some of the other athletes in other sports are not getting it. And so I think the perception of what a student or what a parent should expect for their student going into this situation is important to talk about.
That's right. And it's going to vary to some degree, institution by institution. How important are especially in this Olympic year, how important are some of these Olympic sports to school, like swimming, gymnastics, whatever, which are not revenue-generating sports for the most part anywhere, but they may be part of the cachet of the school, and there may be a special interest in getting some elite athletes and providing some extra dollars to those recruits that are in that space. The traditional places where we think about this with elite football players, elite basketball players, basketball men and women, those kind of make a little bit of sense to people in terms of, if there's a star player and somebody wants them to endorse something, they should be able to get paid for that. Even with the Olympic sports, we thought in the beginning, well, these kids can go home and give tennis lessons or swimming lessons, and they should be able to get paid for that. Or they can participate in these camps that are organized by the schools, right, and they should get paid for that. This NIL space, though, has become something completely different from what was originally contemplated. There was some original legislation in California that made this distinction between endorsement, licensing NIL, versus this idea of, the best way to phrase it is recruiting NIL, just paying someone outright to join an institution. And that's where we'll see a little bit of the break where some schools say, yeah, we want to pay to recruit the swimmer, we want to pay to recruit the gymnast, where some schools will say, well, you're not bringing any money in, right, so we're not looking to provide any of these dollars from these things called collectives to those students.
Then the question becomes, what should we expect to see play out in the years ahead in terms of the investment from these collectives which to a degree, it does feel a little bit like the old days of the under the table payments. Back in the day, you and I both well know of.
Although neither of us received them.
No, we definitely did not. But the booster support that used to be there, and it feels a little bit like that, but maybe a little bit more structured because you have this quote unquote collective component around it.
Yeah. So the collectives have become exactly that. What's really above board, old school booster payments to athletes that schools desire to recruit out of high school, that they want to retain because of the transfer portal. They want their student athletes to leave. Yeah. So we'll just make these payments to keep these students as part of old great university, whatever it might be. So that's not what people contemplated this was going to be. But what happened when California, Florida, all these states began to pass legislation saying NIL is okay, the NCAA, for whatever reason, partly because there was a Supreme Court case, the Alston case, that said, you know what, you better allow some more revenues to go to these student athletes. Right. The NCAA kind of froze, and then institutions started doing what they wanted to do. Right. Because there was no regulation by the NCAA, and that's when it flowed over from this whole idea of licensing to this idea of, hey, we can just give money to bring in student athletes that we want.
And the state law or regulation becomes that much more important in terms of what you can and can't do, and maybe what we will see play out in other states over the next several years. And it also makes me wonder, again, are we seeing another layer to the control of the NCAA being whittled away because of this?
We are, and the other piece that we're starting to see, well, to be surprised if it does happen, this conversation has been going on for a while. Senator Cory Booker and others, Senator Blumenthal, others leading the way. We need federal legislation to cover this. So we have this patchwork now. It's about 27 or 8 states that have regulations. We have the NCAA coming in every now and then. And this is a classic spot as a lawyer where we understand federal legislation is to come in and make this kind of controversial issue uniform across the states. But the problem is, as important as you and I might think it is because it's sports, there's a lot of other things going on in the world that Congress should be focused on rather than how do we take care of these issues regarding athletes and payments.
I was thinking about this the other day, but when you look at what has played out, I think there's also a case to be made that there's a benefit, and I use the term in air quotes, for the individual, for the student athlete, in the understanding of what this process is and the component of their brand. Because I don't think it was discussed as much in years past. And it's probably something that most student athletes didn't even consider, that they actually have a brand that has some value depending on, where you are. And that's an important lesson to understand as you move forward and move your way through college and into the business world.
No, that's exactly right. We do a program here at Wharton for NFL athletes. We started doing it again this year. It's about 36 athletes. One of the topics we have is understanding your brand, and the great Professor Americus Reed comes in and talks to them about this value. And for some of them, it's the first time the light bulb's going off that, hey, the way that I am projected out there may match with a company or some endorser or whoever, so I have to be cognizant of how I am out there. Now, wouldn't it be great, or maybe not, if the younger you start with thinking about that, the stronger your brand is and the stronger you are in thinking about those kinds of issues and being able to monetize them. So some of what started early on as NIL began to flurry, I know at Tennessee, Texas A&M, a couple other schools, they did incorporate instructors from their business schools and otherwise to talk to student athletes about this. Another piece that came into play, kind of related to what you're saying, is the idea of financial literacy fluency. Sure. And so a number of investment companies joined schools to kind of deliver this. What do you do if you get $400 extra a month? What should you do with it?
Yeah, right. and it becomes that much more important for the growth of the college student.
Right. If you challenge your 18-year-old Dan self $400 extra a month, what are you going to do with it? The answers probably are not.
That was back in 1985. That could be a dangerous question. I think also, do you have to look at this from how it could potentially impact high school athletes? Because there's even more of a conversation about the component of your name, image, and likeness as these young individuals are in high school. And obviously there's the component of social media. Everybody's on social media and you're promoting yourself and things that you're doing on those different platforms. It makes me worried of how much farther this path goes,
right,
in terms of the connection around NIL.
Yeah, I tell people in the sports space, the younger this athlete gets, the more we should be okay with being paternalistic. The more we should be okay with thinking, is this really the right thing for this young person to have? For example, as a 8th, 9th grader, to have businesses approaching them about having these relationships. Sure. Is what kind of requirements can we have in there to make sure it goes through parents? Of all these things, right, the younger they get. But the idea where I push back when people are disturbed by it is, everybody should have the right to make as much money as they can by legal means, especially from their name, image, and likeness. So that's where we have to be careful. But I think it is okay to think about having more concern for how these young people are treated and what they learn in this process.
So then what do you think is the path then? I mean, is there a path to truly find a scenario that works for everybody? And there is the benefit,
right,
but you're also doing it in a landscape where the structure is complementary to the individual as well.
Yeah. Here's what I think in the end. So there are laws in place. For years, there have been laws in place, especially in California and New York, for regulating child actors and kind of the
Sure.
old Mickey Rooney stories and
Yeah.
Judy Garland. How do you make sure these kids get their money in the end? So those regulations are they have never been perfect, as we've seen some kids grow up, but they're tried and true and probably the best that we're going to have.
Right.
And at the higher end, the idea of, there was one kid that was offered apparently, $14 million to come to Florida or Miami or one of the schools, and, ended up accepting 9 somewhere else and didn't get paid that. So he lawsuits and all that. The market will, this is a very Wharton answer. The market will eventually settle out. Right. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on now. But if you let the wild, wild west take place for a while, and you let legislators try to figure out, well, where can we play in this? Oh, yeah, we have these existing laws. Let's put these in place. And maybe there's some overlay of federal law that comes into play. But it's going to take time. But in the end, what we have is the myth of amateurism has been exploded.
Yeah.
The idea that athletes should not receive revenue for their athletic ability at some age. All that's been pretty much blown out of the water. And with these Olympic Games coming up, it does remind us again, why were we so concerned about keeping college athletes from receiving any compensation when every other commercial we see during the Olympics is one of these Olympic athletes that's out there performing?
It makes you wonder where we're headed with this in general over the next handful of years as this becomes more and more the landscape, because I'm a dad that's got 3 teenagers, 2 of which who might very well have a chance of playing college athletics, but I want to make sure that they're in a good framework, good set. And I think this also puts more pressure on the parents to really make sure that they have the framework in place so their young Johnny or Jane is prepared for this component of the college experience.
Right, and that's parents have to be in this.
Yeah,
this is another of the things that's not not but it's important to allow it to move forward, because it's going to take us to a better place than we were. That said, absolutely, you can't receive anything.
Is this the part of the downfall then longer term of the NCAA as we move forward here?
The NCAA, somebody told me years ago when I first got to Wharton, a professor had done some work, wrote a great book on the NCAA, and I talked to him, and this wasn't in the book. He said, in the end, the one thing the NCAA does great is runs championship tournaments.
Right.
So let us continue to find ways for the NCAA to focus on that. I mean, they lost the college football championship already.
Yeah.
But the basketball tournament, all these other tournaments, different divisions, they do a great job. So there's some level at which, and you almost compare the NCAA with, the NFL. The league office is great at putting together schedules,
Right.
but don't have them do the day-to-day running of a team. So there's some movement that needs to take place. I don't think NCAA is going away completely at any point.
Yeah.
This association kind of setting for college sports is important, but there's a lot that they should not be involved in.
So it sounds like you're fairly optimistic on that. Well, I mean, and that's a tough question, I think, right now because of all of the issues around the NCAA and around college. I mean, we're talking about a time where you have conference upheaval and, you don't know where you're going to be playing and all these different components that, if we can have some level of confidence about this component of college athletics moving forward, then at least we're taking at least one step in the right direction.
We're headed to a better place. I mean, Ivy sports, which have never had this big money problem in the modern era, but parenthetically, this was the place where the problem did exist historically.
Yeah.
That sport is as exciting as it's been. And guess what? The SEC and the Big Ten are as exciting as they've been, and there's plenty of upside for that. And they're going to have a lot more money there, where the Ivies are going to be kind of where they are.
Great seeing you again. Thank you. Ken Shropshire, who is Professor Emeritus in Legal Studies and Business Ethics here at the Wharton School.
Thank you for listening to The Ripple Effect. We hope you found this episode informative and engaging. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review so that we can continue to bring you the best insight from the Wharton School.